You are now listening to the Counterflow Podcast, a place for dissonant voices and unapproved opinions.
You get split in half, but I call the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid, and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Here is your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back once again to the Counterflow Podcast. As always, I am your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson, coming to you out of Lockhart, Texas, with part two, the final part of our series, our two-part series with Dr. Clark Carlton. I'm calling it a careful examination or an explanation, if you will, of the Orthodox faith. There's a lot of misnomers, some confusion, some questions. I get questions a lot. How does Orthodoxy compare to, let's say, Protestantism or the Catholic faith, Catholicism, or any other, there's even people coming to this from Eastern mysticism and Buddhist stuff and whatnot. Why is the Orthodox Church, the Orthodox faith, why is it different? What makes it stand out? Or where is it coming from? All of these questions, I hope and I think, are answered in part one and this part two of this discussion with the great Clark Carlton. I do urge you, if you have not heard part one, it's just you go back one episode in whatever app or platform you're hearing this at. Go back one episode, you will find part one. I highly recommend that. And without further ado, let's get into part two with Clark Carlton. Here we go. Well, a lot of us just went, well, not me, but a lot of people just went through this, through Great Lent. And this Great Lent, this was a topic I was fascinated with the last few years, but I, more so this year, I don't know specifically why, partly because I didn't hear it spoken of prior to getting into Orthodoxy, but Holy Saturday. And it seems like that gets overlooked. I don't know why, but
I think this is the real great tragedy. Originally, Pascha, Easter was one day, Sunday. And over time, it gets stretched out over what's called in Latin the Triduum, the whole Friday through Sunday complex of services. But at the heart of this is the liturgy on Holy Saturday, which very few people go to. Both the Roman Church, and remember, Rome's Orthodox for 1,000 years. So Rome's the Benedictine hours and the Roman canon are all perfectly Orthodox. And in both Roman Orthodox, we got this habit of anticipating services in Holy Week by doing like morning services in the evening and evening services the next morning. Right. And everything time-wise gets kind of out of whack. And so in the Orthodox, in the Byzantine Rite, we do Matins, the morning service of Holy Saturday on Friday night. And then you do Vespers of Holy Saturday, Saturday morning. Really should be done in the afternoon, but everybody does it Saturday morning. And hardly anybody goes to this service. It's the most important service of the year. It's the original Paschal Vigil. Okay? It's more important than the midnight liturgy, frankly. It is the center of the entire, all of our theology is encompassed in this. And we call this the Great and Holy Sabbath. Because on this day, God rested from all his work. Okay? This is the seventh day of creation. If we go back to Genesis, God creates the world in 6 days, and on the seventh, he rests. Well, Holy Saturday is the great and holy Sabbath. Christ rests from all his work. Okay? Well, he's not really resting. He's resting in the tomb. His body is resting in the tomb, but he's busy. There's a hymn which the priest prays at every divine liturgy, but is actually part of the Paschal hours. In the tomb with the body, in Hades with the soul as God, in paradise with the thief, and on the throne with the Father and the Spirit, was thou thyself, O boundless Christ, filling all things. This is the consummation of creation.
Yes.
Okay? Creation is consummated on Saturday. Christ has filled heaven and earth with his presence. He never left the Father. He was always with the Father, even when he was walking on earth. His body is sealed in a tomb with guards posted on it. His soul has descended into the realm of death, or Hades. And it's the same Christ filling all things. Is that word Catholic again? This is the meaning of Catholicity. Mm-hmm. One Christ filling everything completely. And so what's so really cool is on Holy Saturday, in the Orthodox tradition, we place a tomb in the middle of the church. The Western Church has a tomb too. They put reserved sacrament in the tomb on Holy Friday, which is really cool. We don't put the sacrament there, but we put a cloth called a plashenitsa, or an epitaphion in Greek. The epitaphios is a burial shroud. This came about because of the Shroud of Turin, by the way.
I did not know that. Okay.
Oh, yes.
Wow.
This is going to take, we're over time. You know that we're over time.
I know. I'm going to, if you still got some time, I'm going to make this into 2 parts. So we're good.
That's fine. Okay. Well, so I'm going to tell you the story. We'll get back to Holy Saturday in a minute because it's all connected.
Yeah.
Sometime in the mid 6th century, workers found walled up in the city of Edessa a cloth. And it bore a facial image. Now, there had been a rumor since the early 2nd century, at least, of Christ sending an image of his face to the king of Edessa. It was an ancient legend that the king of Edessa had asked Christ to come visit and preach, and Christ said, I'm too busy, I can't do it. He puts a cloth to his face, a miraculous image is created, and he sends the image to Edessa. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, somewhere in the mid 6th century, they find a cloth walled up in the city. It had been walled up, I guess, for protection. Except it wasn't just a facial image, it was a full body image. In the mid 10th century, the emperor decided this needed to come to Constantinople for protection. So around 950 or so, it's brought to Constantinople. It's placed in the imperial treasury. Everybody knows it's a full body image at this point, not just a face. On Holy Friday, it's kept in a big casket. On Holy Friday, it was put on a winch and was slowly raised up out of the casket in which it was kept so people could see this image. Now, over your right shoulder, you have an icon called extreme humility.
Mm-hmm. It's one of my favorite ones. Yeah.
There are different versions of this icon. If it were a bigger icon or more of it, you would see that there's a box at the bottom.
Yes, that's my favorite one.
Which doesn't make any sense because Christ, his eyes are closed. He's clearly dead. Why is a dead body sticking up out of a box? This makes no sense. Holy Friday, the shroud is pulled up out of its casket in sections on Holy Friday. So that's what you would have seen in Constantinople in the 10th and 11th centuries. Had you been there on Holy Friday, you would have seen the shroud, this image, coming up out of this box. Okay? As a result of that, people started sewing burial shrouds.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And they show up all over this. This is where the epitaphion comes from.
Okay.
Okay? They're copies.
Yes.
And of course they add,
yes,
Nicodemus and everybody, other people to it. But that's where it starts out. It's a copy of the ideal is the copy of the shroud. Now, in 1204, when the Crusaders sacked Constantinople, this disappears. And it stays disappeared for 150 years till it shows up in Lille, France. So if anybody's wondering, is the Shroud of Turin authentic? Yeah, it is.
Wow, it's amazing. Yeah.
Okay. So back to Holy Saturday. So we put this thing out in the church, this burial shroud of Christ and being buried in the middle of the church on Holy Saturday. We celebrate the Eucharist. Now, the Greeks take it in on Friday night.
Mm-hmm.
But in the Russian tradition, we leave it out, which is, I'm not sure which is older, but this makes more sense, actually. Because this is the Sabbath. Christ is still technically still in the tomb.
Mm-hmm.
But he's in the tomb as a victor. So we're celebrating the Eucharist. In Jerusalem, the Saturday liturgy is celebrated in the tomb. In the Edicule, it is celebrated on the tomb itself, the Holy Saturday. If you go to the church in Jerusalem, the Anastasis, there's a church there, but the tomb is not, it's in a big rotunda outside the church. But the Holy Saturday liturgy is actually celebrated by the patriarch in the tomb on the slab or on the marble that's over the slab.
Right.
This is the most important liturgy of the whole year.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is Christ's death and his descent into death that is the victory. You know, we often have this idea. When I was a kid, I remember Dallas Home and praise, I'll rise again. And, you know, this idea that, the devil won on Friday and Christ counterattacks on Sunday or whatever it happens to be. And rose from the dead, see, this kind of idea. But no, Christ's death is the victory. Christ's descent into Hades is the victory. That's why in English it's called the harrowing of hell.
Yep.
Okay. He's conquering. The gates of brass are being crushed. That's why on Paschal morning, we let the gates be opened.
Mm-hmm.
He's commanding. He's storming Hades to release the captives, and so all this is going on at Holy Saturday. So that is really the original Paschal liturgy, which is really the coolest service. Honestly, the coolest service. Because you're actually into Pascha by the time you sing the what takes the place of the Alleluia after the epistle, "Arise, O God, and judge the earth." Okay, arise, O God. This is God entering into Hades and bringing judgment into the earth, and that's when in the Russian tradition you change the vestments from dark to white. To light. So you're it's technically Pascha at this point, and yet the epitafios is still there. The tomb is still there because, as we see in our hymns, joy and resurrection has dawned. Life has dawned from the tomb.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is my favorite service. It really is the most beautiful service of the year. What Rome did in the wake of Vatican II was they decided to stop anticipating everything. So in the Roman Church, they'll do the Paschal Vigil on Saturday night, and then just do a first Mass of Easter on Sunday morning at a sensible, sane time, when people aren't dead tired. I almost wish we'd do that. To be perfectly honest about it, because this is such a beautiful service. This really is the Paschal service, even more so than the midnight service. So I encourage everybody, if you've Orthodox people, if you've not been to the Sabbath service, you need to start going, because it's really the best service of it's the center of the entire liturgical year.
This good thing we have some time. We're into part 2 now.
Yes, right.
Because this is going to be a simplistic, very easy thing to discuss. The tenets of the Trinity. I mean, in some ways it is simplistic, but it's so complex. It's there's so many paradoxes within Orthodoxy. But I'll let you take it.
Well, let's start with the word paradox. I think the paradoxes are intentional rather than a byproduct. For our rational mind, paradoxes are something to get rid of. For us, the paradoxes are there to remind us that this is not something that we can grasp. This is not something that we can understand. So the problem is when people start talking about theologies of the Trinity, the more people want to talk about the Trinity, I can guarantee the less they know. They're talking. God becomes this abstraction that we talk about. So the Orthodox position is this: there's one God because there is one Father. The Father begets the Son and breathes forth the Spirit eternally, such that the Son is everything that the Father is, and the Spirit is everything that the Father is, except that the Son isn't the Father and the Father is not the Son. But that's really the only distinction. We have certain ways. I know John Bears talked about this. If we just talk about the Trinity or Christology, the way the Fathers and the way the hymnography does, we wouldn't get in trouble. But for some reason, we want to talk in abstractions, and we want to make things really complicated. I think probably the single thing I would like for your viewers to get about today. Let's go back to the fundamentalist business a minute. That fundamentalist and modernist reaction to modernism, because they accept the framing. They accept the modernist framing. Okay? And you'll always go wrong. I've said many times, heresies tend to come in two flavors. There are enthusiast heresies, where somebody claims to have a special relationship to the Holy Spirit. You know, the Montanist, modern charismatics. I think Catherine Kuhlman would be like a poster child for a Montanist, a modern day Montanist and enthusiast. Most heresies, however, are the result of people trying to overthink, people treating Christianity as though it were a philosophy, as though it needs to have this rationally sketched out theories. And if you look at most of the major heresies, Sabellianism, Apollinarianism, Arianism, Eunomianism, Nestorianism, Eutychianism, Monothelitism, Thomism. You take all of these isms, they all have one thing in common. They're all the result of people trying to interpret Christianity in light of some preconceived philosophical idea or philosophical structure. God is the absolutely simple essence of the Greek philosophers. Okay. This gets Thomas into trouble because his God is essentially Aristotle's first mover, which wasn't even God for Plotinus, who has a God behind that, who is actually beyond being. And so you get all these arguments. They're philosophical arguments because in no case, in none of the Greek philosophers is their ultimate God, their ultimate reality, a personal existence. I mean, they all believed in gods, quote unquote, spirits, diamonds in some form or another. Mm-hmm. But when Plato talks about the good, which is really God for him, or when Plotinus talks about the one, or when Aristotle talks about the first mover, in no sense, in any of those senses, are these gods personal beings that have a name, a God who acts within history, a God who does things. I am the God. But what is the Christian? I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I am the God who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. I'm the God who did this, this, and this. Okay. I'm the God who talked with Moses as a man speaketh with his friend. That's unknown in the Greek world. Yes, they have gods and lesser divinities, but when you're talking about the Greek philosophers, when they talk about what's the logos of the Stoics or the one of Plotinus, it's an abstract philosophical concept that is not a person in any conceivable sense of the term. So then you have people who want to view Christianity through this lens of abstract philosophical thought and try and force God into these abstract boxes. Okay? So if God is this absolutely simple essence, there can't be Father, Son, and Spirit. There can only be one of these absolutely simple. So that must mean, as Arius and Eunomius said, that the Son is a created being. Mm. And so almost every major heresy that has plagued the church is a result of people trying to treat Christianity as though it's a philosophical system and trying to impose these non-biblical and non-Christian preconceptions about what God is and what God is supposed to be like onto, and then try interpret the Bible, interpret Christian activity in light of what's going on here. And of course, you end up with a disaster every time. Now, that's clearly what the heretics are doing. Now, what modern historians tend to do is when we read these doctrinal controversies, we look back and we think, well, okay, the Arius has come up with the wrong answer to the question, and Athanasius has come up with the right answer. But the assumption is that Athanasius is doing the same thing Arius was doing. He's just getting the right answer. In other words, he's engaging in the same kind of quasi-philosophical, theoretical discussion. He's just arrived at the quote-unquote correct answer. And that's almost never the case. The fathers aren't doing philosophy. They're not constructing theories. We don't have a theory of the Trinity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? We have doxological praises. We have hymns. We have doxologies, but we don't have a theory of the Trinity. And the problem is, and it's precisely the fact that heretics did have a theory.
Mm.
The problem isn't that the heretics come up with the wrong answers to the question. The problem is they're asking the wrong questions to begin with.
Right.
And we have to get out of this assumption that the fathers are answering the same question. They're just answering it better than the heretics did.
Right.
And that's the mistake we made. And even good historians, I think, make that. We want to make things like the Trinity, we want to overcomplicate things. Or we want to make Christology overcomplicated. There's something called the quote-unquote hypostatic union. This is an invention of scholars.
Mm-hmm.
All Cyril of Alexandria meant by that phrase is real union. That's all he meant. It's not a theory. It just means real union.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to what? As opposed to a mere conjunction where divinity and humanity are kind of running side by side. No, it's a real union in one person. That's all it means. It's not a theory. I've just put, most teachers of church history out of business here, because this is how we make our money, is by overcomplicating this stuff and by treating this as though orthodoxy is this big, elaborate theory. And in fact, it's not. In fact, it's an anti-theory, if it's anything. Stop asking these stupid questions. How does God become man? There's no answer to that question. When you can explain how God made the universe, you can start opining about all this other stuff. Until then, it's a silly question. So what the church gives us are ways of speaking. And this is the best way to understand church doctrine, by the way, church dogma, is that these are the church's rules for how we should speak, how we should talk about these things. And for the most part, the fathers are telling us what not to say rather than what to say. Here are some things here's some wrong ways of putting this. Okay. And if we approach dogma that way, we will understand that orthodoxy is not a matter of crossing your T's, of memorizing a bunch of, here's some beliefs I have to believe. No, orthodoxy is a life to live. It's heresy that wants you to sign on the bottom line and commit yourself to believing certain things. John Meyendorff was fond of saying orthodoxy is the only religion that doesn't require you to believe anything that isn't true. The problem with the Roman Catholic Church, one of them, is that it is dogma of the Roman Church that the Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son ab utroque, as from a single source.
Mm-hmm.
That's not true. So I can't be a Roman Catholic because I can't agree to that. I can't say amen to that. Okay? It's heresies that want to make you agree to something like that. Whereas what is the Orthodox position? Well, what does the scripture says is from John, I don't remember the verse, but the Spirit who proceeds from the Father. There you go.
Mhm.
This is how we talk. And so we keep to the way the church tells us. How does the church tell us? In our hymnography, in our prayers. Okay. If people want to understand the Orthodox doctrine of salvation, get a copy of the Liturgy of St. Basil and read St. Basil's canon, a Eucharistic canon. It's the single best synopsis of Orthodox soteriology that's ever been written. But it's not complicated enough. Well, that's the point. It's not complicated at all. Here's what you need to believe as an Orthodox Christian. Okay, that part's not complicated. It's we who want to make it complicated because it flatters our ego. I go back to all these people I've muted on the Twitters. It's ego flattering. Well, I can discuss essence and energies, and I can talk about how Aristotle uses this word, and it's ego inflation. It's ego inflation. That's all. It's not what the fathers are doing. They're not doing philosophy, because everything they're saying is ultimately designed to get you to pray better, to behave yourself, to pray better, to enter more fully into the life of the church, the liturgical and sacramental life of the church, and to pray more deeply and without distraction. That's what it's all about.
Mm-hmm.
It's about, going back to the question you asked about theosis. Everything is about your spiritual life. Everything is about you getting more deeply into this. And you get more deeply into this not by reading Vladimir Lossky's Mystical Theology. It's a nice book, but most lay people don't need to read that book.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to help you pray.
Right.
And it may go to your head.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I have found it that some people like myself and probably people listening right now are so fascinated by the depth of Orthodox Christianity that we're turned on by reading. Well, I want to go to read something. And then you meet like an old, cradle Orthodox Russian lady or something. It's like, she's not going to explain all these things that I just read in this book. She doesn't need to. And so we kind of get this zealous nature, like, oh, I want to find out more and more. And then maybe it's helpful to look at the old Russian grandmother who's praying in church, and maybe that's something to kind of model rather than like what books you can read.
It absolutely is. And remember, I think we mistake where the depth is.
That's a great point.
And I told you at the very beginning of this that I came to Orthodoxy out of books, which is not a good way to do it, by the way, but it is what it is. I was just totally enamored of John Zizioulas, being his communion. And, as I like to say, when I was a child, I spoke as a child. And when I grew up, I put away childish things. And so I haven't opened Zizioulas in 20 years, probably. We mistake where the depth is. We think that the depth is this intellectual, look at how deep all these ideas are. And in fact, the depth of the idea, if there's depth there, they draw you to repentance. They draw you closer into the mystery. They should make you uncomfortable where you are. And if reading, church fathers, if then it's having the exact opposite intention, because it's so many of us, and as a professional egghead, this is the persistent temptation for me, and I know a lot of other people, to over-intellectualize things, because again, it flatters us. It makes us feel good. Oh, I can, and then we can look down at other people. Well, you don't understand. You've never read Dionysius the Areopagite.
Yes.
I guarantee most of the people who talk about Dionysius the Areopagite don't know what the hell he's talking about. Because Dionysius is a mystagogue. He's describing the liturgy. He's trying to get people into a deeper understanding of the liturgy. This is not a treatise in Neoplatonic metaphysics, which is how most people read it. And because it's flattering to us, I understand this and you don't. Yeah. And a lot of converts think they've got it all over the Babas, because the poor Baba doesn't know any of this, doesn't know any of these fancy Greek terms. But the Baba's knees may be raw from kneeling in prayer, which is going to get her a lot further on the day of judgment than all of your book learning is going to do.
Yes.
And so this may sound odd coming from a philosophy professor, but to quote my favorite philosopher, Wittgenstein, it's philosophers that muddy the waters. Life is fine the way it is. It's that we want to overcomplicate things because it suits our purpose and it makes us feel better. It's also a distraction because I don't have to worry about my sins and I don't have to worry about my character flaws and I don't have to worry about all those things that are real impediments to my relationship with God when I can turn God into an object of thought and then congratulate me on how clever I am for having, figured all this stuff out.
You've walked me right into where I wanted to go with this, and we got about 20 more minutes. Humility, pride, the lives of the saints, how all of these things are viewed within an Orthodox or from an Orthodox lens within the church, let's say, because, and we can include the passions in there, because I think pride is sort of an inversion of humility, but I'll let you take it.
Well, yeah, I mean, Orthodoxy is not really about rule following. Some people get obsessed with fasting rules and label reading and all that. It's a straight Pharisaism is always going to be a temptation. But if you read most Orthodox literature, the fathers are concerned with cultivating the virtues. And reading some of the old Greeks and Romans is not a bad thing to do here, because before you can cultivate the evangelical virtues, we have to acquire some of the basic natural virtues as well. And so learning, honesty and self-denial, self-control. You're not going to acquire selfless love unless you've acquired self-control first. You're not going to conquer gluttony or anything else, any other passions, unless you've learned self-control. So the church focuses on the acquisition of the virtues. And that's really what things like fasting rules are designed to do. They're designed to curb the passions and inculcate virtues within us, especially virtues of self-control. And
that's
moderation.
A great point. If I may interrupt real quick, my spiritual father, Father Turbo Qualls, has said, "Show me a young man who's addicted to porn, and I'll show you one who's not fasting." That's interesting that you kind of touched on the same thing.
Yeah, and the fathers, the really interesting stuff that the fathers wrote is not the stuff we mistakenly think of as high theology. It's their understanding of psychology. The only significant advances in psychology you get from the ancient Greeks to the modern period are the Desert Fathers. And Evagrius talks about this. Evagrius, in he has several treatises on the what he called the 8 evil thoughts, which of course is the origin of the 7 deadly sins, and one of them gets lost in translation. But the 8 evil thoughts he correlates to the 3 faculties of the soul, which comes right out of Plato, by the way. You have the reason, the temper, and the appetites. And so the first line of demonic assaults that we undergo and that the first passions we deal with are those dealing with the appetites, gluttony, lust. And then you have the temper, so pride and disappointment and these kinds of things. And then finally, you have the sort of the intellectual passions. And of course, pride would be, vainglory would be lower, but pride. And Evagrius connects all of these to really the dysfunction within the human soul and how disordered we are. And in order to be ordered, we have to get properly ordered. Everything has to go back in functioning properly. This is why, by the way, the Greek fathers borrowed a lot from Greek literature because this had been a consistent theme of Greek philosophy for several hundred years, and the Greeks had learned a lot, frankly, and so the fathers sort of built on this sort of basis. But the idea was that you need to get in order so that you can cooperate with the grace that's been given to us in baptism, the grace that's been given to us within the church. Because otherwise, you're doing you're trying to do one thing, but your life is embroiled in the passions, whether it's lust or gluttony or desire for money or the praise of men, vainglory, or whatever it happens to be. Grace and the passions are at cross purposes. And a good bit of our Christian life, and going back to this idea of catechesis as moral catechesis, is learning how to operate as a normally functioning human being, which in this day, Buck, is quite a feat, because everybody is telling us that what is abnormal and inhuman is normal. Mm-hmm. And I said to my students the other day, I said, God, don't raise your hands. I don't want anybody making confessions in class. But I said, most of you have been on Adderall or Ritalin or Prozac or Xanax or something like this. And I said, I'm not telling you don't take your medicines. That's between you and your doctor. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not giving medical advice. But I am going to tell you that for 18, 19, and 20-year-olds to need medication to get through the day, that's not normal.
Right.
There's something fundamentally effed up about our society.
Yeah.
And I'm here to tell you, I said, and you're not alone. If you're having psychological problems, you're not alone, because it's like most of my students at one point or another, it's just incredible the amount of psychological problems students are having. It's just gone with COVID. It went hockey. It was going up, but with COVID, it just did the hockey stick thing, straight through the roof. But I said, you're absolutely not alone. But I'm here to tell you, it's not normal. You shouldn't need drugs to get through the day. I'm gonna tell you, don't take your drugs. Good. You deal with your doctor, but there's something not normal here. And so a good bit of the Christian life, particularly for us here and now, is learning how to be normal. Just live a basic. Nothing that is natural is foreign to orthodoxy. Nothing that is normal and natural, because God created nature. And so nothing that is truly natural. That's what we talked about, the family meal being a sacramental act, a Eucharistic act. Nothing that is natural is foreign to orthodoxy. But we live in a society in which the abnormal is presented as normal, in which the unhealthy is presented as healthy.
Yes.
In which, you mean you're not on Prozac? What's wrong with you?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of this, and a lot of the fathers are dealing with, is simply trying to get us to a normal baseline, so that we can then, and only then, start dealing with spiritual, deeper spiritual issues. At some point, you just have to get to like normal functioning, human functioning, and then we'll worry about the other stuff.
Right.
But everybody wants to, this deeply spiritual stuff. And there's no point in talking about spiritual matters if you haven't acquired, even the basics, human virtues.
Yes.
And that's why, I said catechesis in the early church is primarily moral catechesis. You're trying to get people to a kind of state of created normalcy. Then we can worry about theosis.
Mm-hmm.
Then we can worry about Christification, because Christ is the revelation of what it means to be human.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay? Christ is the first Adam, the Adam before there was an Adam. There is no definition of human being that isn't Christiform.
Right.
Okay? Which is why our if you ever see an icon of the creation of Adam,
yes,
that Christ in the garden, not the old man
Right.
with a beard, but Christ is in the garden, and Adam
Looks
exactly like Christ.
right.
Okay. So Christ is the full measure of what it means to be human, which is why Christ is the one who's going to judge us on the day of judgment,
Yes.
because he is the full measure of what it means to be human. And so the first thing that Orthodoxy seeks to do is simply get us to just sort of baseline humanity, and then we can worry about the other stuff. The evangelical versions, those things will come as we become part of the church and as we live the life of the church. But the real struggle for us, especially today, especially in this crazy postmodern world, is just becoming normally human.
Yeah.
That in and of itself is a radical act today.
Yeah. It's almost, I've joked that it's the new punk rock or something to be just normal. It's what used to be fringe, right? It's like,
yeah.
Now what was fringe is normal. What's us, we're fringe ones now, looking outside, looking in. We'll get this in closing. This is something I see constantly. I don't know. I just like your take on it. A misconception of Orthodox Christianity, possibly based on, let's say, the American pop culture version of Christianity. So in other words, like an atheist wanting to come, Mr. Carlton, I got some questions about, you said you're a Christian. Well, to me, Christians do this. And you want to go, well, that's not Orthodoxy. What's something in that regard?
Oh, I'm torn here because I just said a minute ago that in the ancient church, church services are an in-house, really meant for family only, really. Church services were not seen as evangelistic tools. You evangelized by being a Christian. You evangelized by the life you lead with other people. Having said that, I think inviting people to services is a good way, because what we do is so different from just about everything else anybody's familiar with. Father Stephen Freeman told me a story. He had carried on a long conversation with some fellow who was an atheist. I don't know how long they'd been talking together, and he said, I still don't believe in God, but the God I don't believe in is now different from the God I didn't used to not believe in. And Father Stephen took that as a strange sort of compliment.
It is, yeah, in a weird way.
At least he had disabused him, because again, people come up with all some of these ideas that God hates you, that God doesn't want you to have fun, and then of course the hip Christian alternative is, oh no, God's a fun God, and our God's an awesome God, and we want to have, God's the God of fun, so let's go to church and have fun. And so you've got all this stuff going on. As far as presenting Orthodoxy is fundamentally a way of life, and it's fundamentally the cultivation of spiritual humility. And I think Orthodox, myself included, don't come across that way to most people, because most people think of us as being triumphalistic, even when you're not trying to be. Some Orthodox are triumphalistic. I have known Orthodox people who are just like, but even when you're not trying to come off as triumphalistic, half the stuff I've said will have offended much of your audience without me even trying to or wanting to. The claim that that this is the truth is offensive to people. That this is the way things are is offensive to people. Okay. I can guarantee you, if any Anglicans were listening to this, they've turned it off in a huff already. If by some men they're still listening, they're hopping mad, because nobody wants to be told, that what they believe isn't the truth. But the Orthodox position is that orthodoxy is the truth. And the secular materialists, what they teach, what they understand, their understanding of the world is not true. Doesn't mean all of it's not true. There may be some truth there, and maybe we can find some place to start. I think that's what you have to do, is you have to find some common ground with people. But the atheist believes things about reality that aren't true. And they're going to be offended when you tell them that.
Mm-hmm.
How dare you think that? But, well, Christ said, I am the way, the truth, and the life.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't deny that without denying Christ. But to say that orthodoxy is the truth, I didn't invent orthodoxy.
Right.
I didn't make it. I'm not responsible for any of this.
Right.
I don't claim responsibility for anything in this book, and anything that is mine is probably wrong. What I tried to do was simply to reproduce in a readable format what I had received, without me adding, any of my own stuff to that. Now, there probably is some of me in there, and so that part is probably not true, and you can ignore that part. But the idea was to simply reproduce what I have received. I didn't invent this stuff. It's I don't get, not only do not I not get credit for it, I will be judged for it.
Mm-hmm.
In a way that other people won't be judged. Those who've never heard of Christ are not going to be judged by, what I know.
Right. Yes.
So rather than be triumphalistic about it, orthodoxy, it should make you humble, and it should make you somewhat reticent to know that I'm going to be judged for not living up to all the things that I have said, and that I claim to have all of this, knowledge, and yet I don't live up to it. And I'm going to be judged for that. And so that's a sobering thing. That's not something to be triumphalistic about. That's something to be sober about. But to come back to your question, to the secularists, to the atheists, to just the whatever generation, the nuns, as they're called, the people with no religious affiliation. Well, you're arrogant because you think you have the truth. Well, wait there a minute, Buster. Where's you want arrogant people? Arrogance is calling people who disagree with you bigots. And I have been called bigot. I've had students go, bigoted. And I said, look, I don't care if you disagree with me. In fact, I invite you to disagree with me. You could have said this in class. I would have been happy to, but don't go around calling people bigot. That's not a conversation starter. That's a conversation ender. That's judgmentalism right there. This football player, and I haven't watched the NFL since the strike season, which I think was 1985. You probably weren't even born then. But,
I'm old, Clark.
Okay. I lost interest in the NFL when they went on strike and never got it back. Unlike baseball, which is God's sport, I could live without the NFL. But this football, the place kicker for the Chiefs?
Yeah, Harrison Butker.
Devout Roman Catholic.
Yes.
Gave a speech, and now apparently 100 and some thousand people have signed a petition to get his team to fire him because he's a hateful bigot. Blah blah. Well, no, he's a tradcast. What he is.
Yes.
And he was simply stating what any tradcast would say.
Right. The fact that that's so foreign to so many people is hilarious to me. It's like, well, what do you think? He's a traditional Catholic guy.
Yeah, I mean, so, good for him, but you're a bigot.
Yeah, of course.
I'm sorry, who's the bigot here? Who's trying to get somebody fired? Who's trying to end somebody's career because you disagree with them?
Yes.
Who is being judgmental here?
Mm-hmm.
If you feel that something that he said was judging you, then you might want to ask yourself, well, why does that make you feel uncomfortable?
Mm-hmm.
This should cause, if somebody says something that makes you uncomfortable, the Christian response is to engage in a little bit of self-evaluation at this point and to ask, okay, well, why is he pushed my buttons? To what is this button attached that has created this response? That's the mature thing to do. But what we're getting is, oh my God, you're a bigot, therefore you should lose your job. You shouldn't be able to feed your trad cat family and this kind of thing.
It's Puritanism without Christ.
It is, and so you come back to the question that you asked me about people who come to Orthodoxy. I guess my guess is look to yourself. Are you not being judgmental yourself? Are you not? And then the question is, why? Why are you invested? What is it that you consider so important? What is it that you consider to be the most important thing in life? So I guess my question is, instead of defending Orthodoxy, my inclination would be to turn the tables and say, well, explain yourself. Where are you getting this from? Why do you think this is? Well, I think everybody should be free to live their own lives. Okay, well, what about this over here? What about this over here? Well, no, I don't mean that. And what about it? Well, no, I don't mean that. Well, where's this coming from? The fact is, everybody has a concept of truth. Even the people who say there's no such thing as truth.
Yes. Yeah.
Everybody has a theory of right and wrong, even if it's just different from what somebody else's is, but everybody's common. The big postmodern thing is irony.
Yeah.
But irony is, only eggheads really have the luxury of being ironical.
Mm-hmm.
Most people, we do get invested in things, and we have standards. And when people say, I don't like Orthodoxy because, you're judgmental, what that really means is I'm doing something that even I know is questionable, that even I, in my deepest heart of hearts, have got. And instead of you're affirming me and patting me on the shoulder and telling me it's okay, you may not even be condemning me outright, but the fact that you're lauding this over here, you're lauding a traditional Catholic family with a stay-at-home mom, and she could probably afford to, since he's an NFL player, and 47 kids or however many they've got. The very fact that you're rubbing that in my face. You're me and my cat and my wine. We find that offensive. Well, look to yourself. What's offending you about that? What is a normal, happy family that's bothering you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, you're the one with the problem here. It's like, well, Catholics, Orthodox and Catholics, and Christians. I hate Christians. They're judgmental. Pot, kettle,
right?
On what is your basis? Well, it make me feel bad. That's 9 times out of 10. That's what it comes to. You're making me feel uncomfortable, or you're making me feel bad.
Yes.
And so much of our culture is built around making the unnatural sound natural, making the unhealthy seem healthy. Attacks on body shaming and body acceptance and all this kind of stuff. So much of our culture is invested in making the abnormal seem normal, the unhealthy seem healthy, the psychotic seem healthy, that just the appearance of what in any other era would have been normal standard behavior is enough to send people off to it. And what you get in church, in a liturgy, is the universe ordered rightly. Okay, because when we step into the church, it's a universe, and particularly if you step into one that's been traditionally decorated, where you've got floor to ceiling frescoes all over the place, like Seraphims in Dallas or any of those churches. You go in there, and what you see is a universe which is not opaque, a universe which is transparent to the other world, a universe which is transparent to all of the ancestors and saints who have gone before us, a universe in which God is everywhere, a universe which smells good, a universe which is lit not with glarish Klieg lights, but with candles and glowing and gold shining off the surfaces, a universe which sounds good, in which there is a melodious and a harmonious sound. The divine liturgy is the cosmos ordered rightly. That very act is an offense to some people.
Mm-hmm.
And so if people have a problem with orthodoxy, there's no point in getting mad at them, but you have to understand that the problem is them.
Yes.
The problem is and so evangelistically, we have to find a way to, if it's a stranger, then it's no big deal. But if it's a relative or a neighbor, then we have to find out, okay, well, how can we witness the normalcy and the sanity of orthodoxy without getting in their face, without you really need to come to church. We just be normal, happy people. That again, it's a revolutionary act these days.
Yes. Yeah.
And orthodoxy, we go beyond normal, because again, circle back to where you started with theosis. Ultimately, the goal is to become like God, but that's a lifelong process, and it's one that doesn't really end till we certainly don't complete in this life.
Yes.
But the first stage of that is just being a normally functioning human. And so orthodoxy is first of all the revelation of what it means to be man. Yep. Because Christ is the true man, the first Adam, the archetype of what it means to be human. So orthodoxy is first of all the revelation of what it means to be human. And then once we enter into that, then we become exposed to the divine and what it means to be in communion with the divine. And it's a process, that starts with baptism, but it doesn't end until the last judgment.
Yeah. Beautifully put. Well put. The Faith is the book we've been talking about. I mean, geez, we've gone all over the place. This has been awesome. A two-parter, Clark. Talk about, plug anything you'd like, where they can find this book, the other book, of course, as well. I mean, I just went right to Amazon. But
they're on the Amazonia. I assume if you want to do a bookstore that whatchamacallums, distributors can get them if you need the bookstore discounts.
Yes.
But we've got distributors or whatever. So the Life, which is these two are out now. I am working on revising The Truth, what every Roman Catholic should know about the Orthodox Church. I'm really not happy with this book. So I thought I was going to add a chapter, and now I'm having to rewrite 2 or 3 chapters. So this is going to be a much, much improved book. Hopefully by the end of the summer, I'll have this out. The Way, which contains part of my own conversion story. This probably doesn't need that much done to it. Hopefully by the end of the year, we'll be able to get that done. I will see you, I guess, in September.
Yes. Tell people about that real
Ludwell
quick.
Fellowship, our second turning out to be an annual conference down there in Lockhart, Texas. I've never been to Lockhart, so
it's wonderful. I love it so much.
The problem with Texans is y'all barbecue the wrong damn animal.
Would that be the cow?
Yeah, the cow. It's the wrong animal.
Yeah.
All right-thinking people know you barbecue pigs.
Well, we do that too.
But anyway, I am looking forward to seeing you again.
Yes.
And so the Leadwell Fellowship, we've got a new chief bottle washer and operator. Ben Dixon has taken over from a wreck of the day-to-day sort of stuff. And so we're really excited about the Leadwell Fellowship, and which is, for those who don't know, our purpose is to promote the enculturation of Orthodoxy, primarily in the South. But, what works in the South will work mutatis mutandi in other parts of the country as well. So that's sort of what we're working on right now. So that's basically what we're doing, is getting ready for this new conference, which I think is weekend after Labor Day.
Yeah, I think
in
it's
September.
8th, 7th through 9th, something whatever that weekend in September.
That weekend right after Labor Day, down there in Lockhart, Texas. You'll have to tell people how to get to Lockhart.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not too far. I understand it's between the People's Republic of Austin and San Antonio.
It's about 25 minutes southeast of Austin. It's very close. It's a direct route from the Austin airport to Lockhart via toll road. So it's pretty simple. Yes, sir. Clark, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for doing this and talking about the book. Yes, sir. All right. I hope you guys got a lot out of that. I got a lot out of that. This is the type of discussion where I do the interview. I'm sort of blown away for a little bit, and then I'll listen to it back a couple of times so I can grasp more than I did even the first time. So again, I hope you guys enjoyed that chat with Clark Carlton. Again, the book is called The Faith, an Orthodox Catechism by Clark Carlton. It is in reprint now on Amazon. You can go find it. I highly recommend, if you are part of a parish, which I know a lot of you are, this would be a good addition to the bookstore. And let's see, follow me on Twitter at BuckRebel, BuckRebel. We've got counterflowpodcast.com. We had a great discussion just last week now with Nicholas from Orthodox Reflections in our monthly Zoom session for my supporters, which you can become one at patreon.com/counterflow. $5 or more per month. Get you into the exclusive club where we meet once a month offline, let's say. I mean, it's kind of online, but it's not recorded. It's not posted. It's private. So let's see. I think that's about all we got. Next week's conversation is very, very good. I'm excited for you to hear it. Let's see. Should I give you a hint? She was in a subculture, and that includes part of her spirituality. And now let's say, I guess you could say she's in another subculture. The last true rebellion she is a part of. That's the hints I will give you. Until next week, you guys have a good one.
You get split in half, Clark on the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Like the sound of the Counterflow podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.